mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. My guest today here in studio is the lovely and talented Sally Wolf. She declares herself to be a well-being advisor, but at the end of the day, she's been informed by all sorts of crap that she never asked to have happen to her as a stage 4 breast cancer survivor with an incredible backstory. But first and foremost, she's a dancer, so we're going to get into that. But she's also a fellow Juke Camp alumni, so you can tolerate us as long as you want, fast forward as long as you want. It's an extended episode, but it's worth every cent, I guarantee you. She's been in Allure, The Independent, Oprah, Cosmo. She was recently on a podcast called The Story of Our Trauma, which I will link below in the episode description. I hope you listen to it. It really does sum up who Sally is. And she has a really wonderful article she wrote, this hit me hard, called Redefining Why Me. She's smart, she's sassy, she's fun, she's total Gen X. You're going to love the episode, so let's get started. We were talking about all sorts of crazy shit before. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to ask you a question that I'm pretty sure you've never been asked before. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Never been asked before by anyone else.
No, never, ever.
I've never been asked before while someone was actually correctly recording me.
Correct. Yes, I see what you did there. Who the fuck is Blazer the Wonder Goat?
What?
Yeah. All right.
Wait, what?
No,
I don't know who Blazer the Wonder Goat is.
I'm gonna.
Do you want? Sorry. Do
You
want?
should. Yeah. Well, I have a penchant for people who put their high school on their LinkedIn profile, and whether they do it on purpose or not, or whether it's something they had pride for when they started and forgot it was there. I always think it speaks to character that either they leave it there or they're proud of it's there. But I Googled your high school, Great Neck North High School in Long Island. And the mascot is named Blazer the Wonder Goat. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense, but it also makes sense why I had never heard that before.
All right, go on.
So I graduated in the 90s, and our mascot was not a goat, but we were the Great Neck North Blazers. And
so Blazer, that part's right.
I was a Blazer. However, when I played sports, so I was on the volleyball team, I was a cheerleader. When we had anything where the school was listed, the image that went along with Great Neck North Blazers was an old school, stereotypical, definitely not PC and certainly not allowed anymore, Native American, like old school Indian
headdress and
all the things that definitely would not be allowed.
Face makeup and
all the things.
Yeah.
So
like
I don't
Cleveland
know when.
Indians, but worse.
Exactly. And I don't know when, but at some point between, let's say 1993 and now, but probably go back like 20 years, we rebranded it. And I have no idea how they came up with the goat, which in my opinion is not a very threatening animal. It
Let
doesn't
alone
really.
a Wonder Goat.
Right. Well, the Wonder Goat, I don't know, maybe that becomes a cuter mascot. I'm not really sure. There's also something in the town now that I don't recall from when I was a kid that has the Great Neck Giraffe, which is like a terrible play on the fact that the neck is long.
Great Neck.
The Great Neck Giraffe. So I don't know. I guess like giraffe or goat, what would you pick? Neither really lets you go out on the fields and feel threatening. Like nearby, Roslyn was another town. There were the bulldogs. That feels like a slightly tougher animal, but yeah, where are the goats?
So before you got to be an arborist, I want to hear your volleyball hazing story.
Volleyball, right. So when I was a Blazer at Great Neck North.
Pre-goat.
Definitely with an Indian somewhere on my uniform.
Yes.
I was on the volleyball team, which is, I think, pretty impressive because I was only 5'1". I am only 5'1". Never grew.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. And that said, Great Neck's not really known for its athletics. And I was on the volleyball team and I really enjoyed it. I had one of those varsity jackets, had my name on it, all the things. So I get to college and felt somewhat serendipitous. I was obviously not recruited for volleyball. Somehow I learned freshman week there were 2 spots open on the Harvard volleyball team. So I, ambitious and thinking, I'm going to go for it, go down to the MAC, which is where the tryouts were, and walk in. I'm definitely the littlest person there by a big margin, and also probably like the scrawniest person there. And get on the court, and I don't really remember all the details other than I hit one ball initially. Like one ball was hit to me.
Yeah.
And it hurt more than like 4 years of volleyball in high school. I mean, I looked down and my arms were so red. But I think everyone just took such pity on me. I remember that day. I remember the pain of that shot, but I also remember how kind everyone was and how thoughtful and inclusive they were, probably because 0 of them were nervous that I was competing for any of the slots, that any of them were potentially going to get.
You were the least threatening human there.
Least threatening, but everyone's really, really kind.
Did you go there for psychology, or you landed in psychology?
No, on my application, I wrote I wanted to be a physics major and then go to law school, neither of which I did.
Okay.
So 0 for 2, 0 for 3 if you count the volleyball tryouts.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
Thankfully, they still let me graduate.
Dear Harvard, thank you.
I loved science. I was such a math science kid in high school. And I think what I especially loved is with physics in particular, it was a science that was most math-based. There was always a way to figure something out in a formula-driven way. So there was a clear right and a clear wrong kind of thing. And it felt interesting. You could apply it to the world. Like in high school, we had gone to Great Adventure and had a physics day, and you would calculate things. So
P equals MV. That's all I remember.
I don't even know what I remember
That's
anymore.
momentum equals
thing.
something like that. Mass times velocity.
Or acceleration, or is it velocity?
No, MV, mass times velocity equals P is momentum. I don't know. That's the only thing I remember.
Well,
physics.
I only lasted one semester in physics in college. So what happened was I got to Harvard. My physics teacher had written me a recommendation. I really, really loved it. And I walked into that first semester of what was sort of the advanced track of physics for the people who want to major in physics at Harvard, which is not your average human.
Right.
So, it like went from being the physics star, so to speak, at my high school, where I definitely...
Big fish, small pond.
I got the physics award senior year of high school, to... I was surrounded by people who probably had been doing physics since 5th grade.
Right.
Some of whom came from other countries where they definitely had better science instruction. And I had a professor, who was a literal Nobel Prize winner, but a horrible teacher. And you sort of went down the list of things, and it wasn't a good semester. And I was miserable. And then I had a math teacher the same semester because I loved physics and math. So my backup, well, if I'm not going to major in physics, maybe I'll major in math. I had an equally terrible math instructor. And it just started to feel like that moment of, wait, what am I doing?
Right.
I didn't really aspire to be a physicist or a mathematician. I had always had strong roots in the math area. My mom was a math teacher for 40 years in Brooklyn, actually.
Yes.
FDR High School in Bensonhurst.
Ooh, okay.
And
know it well.
She's a Brooklyn girl. And my dad had briefly taught math, mostly to avoid the Vietnam War draft. But nonetheless, math was my thing. So, I think so much of growth in life is being able to relax the expectations about, well, what did I plan to do, and how do what do I replace that with? Because it was one thing to not like physics and math, and I was miserable freshman fall, but I didn't really know what I would replace it with. And my dad said, I think you would like psychology. I'm actually not really sure where that came from. I mean, my dad knows me well, but he had never studied psychology.
Well, every Jew needs a psychologist, so...
It's not even a major, right? Like how often most parents are not encouraging those more liberal artsy majors where it's like, what do you do with this when you graduate? But my dad had said, I think you would like psychology. Why don't you give it a try? And I vividly remember the second semester of physics and Psych 1, both spring courses, both met Tuesday, Thursday at 10 a.m. So I had to make a choice. I had to be willing to say, I will step off the physics track, and then if I decide to return, I'm going to be quote unquote behind.
Right.
But I had to do that. Right. I had to do that to give it a try, and I did. And psych was it was so different. I had great teachers. It felt relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of it.
So first half of the show is always character development. And we were talking before the show about one of the things that really helped define you and helped the world understand your baseline characters is we both went to Jew camp. And it was defining for me, defining for you. And you went to Bryn Mawr and I went to Roosevelt, and we have mutual friends with the shout out to the Hoffmans if they're listening.
No one's going to be more excited for this podcast than the Hoffman family.
Harvey, Sarah, Amy, and Heather.
Hi.
Big shout out. No one has any idea who they are.
Am I the first Bryn Mawr angel on your show?
Yes, you are.
Well,
I mean,
I'm honored. Bunk
No.
No?
Well,
What?
All right. Amy Hoffman.
Oh.
I don't know. Did we do a show? If she didn't do a show, then you are the first. But you were actually a counselor. She was a camper.
She was a camper. I was 1 year ahead of her.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, she did not go back to be a counselor, but Heather did. Heather and I were counselors together. Yeah, we had some fun.
That was just the weirdest coincidence. Like, no one knows anyone except the Jews from Jew camp. It's like this inbred little world of awesome. But before we go to break, really quickly, tell us why you kept that on your resume.
Gosh, that will never come off my resume or my LinkedIn. I loved being a counselor. I still, right now, even the company that I created where I'll go into companies and give inspirational keynotes and do well-being workshops and help employees to flourish, it literally is getting to be a camp counselor in a company. So the only time I was ever questioned about having it on my resume, I vividly remember I was at Stanford for business school. And basically, you get one page back then. It was one page for a resume. And as you get more experience, you are pretty much expected to remove the things that you did early in your career that are deemed lower value. And a career counselor at Stanford suggested that I remove camp. And I looked at her and I said, absolutely not. And I mean, she was like, her name's Uda. She was the counselor, decades of Stanford Business School. We worshiped Uda. What she said was golden. And I had to say no, because to me, camp was so important in terms of who I was. It was the job that said the most about me as a person. And so I figured out ways to make it seem a little bit more business school-esque, like leadership experience from the Color War Council.
Yes.
I don't even know, Color War might be another thing. It's not allowed to happen anymore.
Not okay.
I know it's no longer the Apache Relay, but at any rate, so I changed it a little, but it stuck. And fast forward, I sent resumes out. I was at business school 01 to 03. The economy was shot. There were not a lot of jobs to be had. But I always had a passion for children, kids media, and sent something to someone at Nickelodeon. And she called me. And she didn't have a job to offer me. They weren't hiring. But she said, but do you know why I wanted to talk to you? Do you know why I called? And I'm thinking about well, did she also go to the same college? What do we have in common?
Was she a fan of the Wonder Goat?
She was not from Great Neck. That would have been funny too. But she said I was a camp counselor too. And it was such a reminder to me to stick to your gut when something is so critically important to you for whatever the reason, but it's so aligned with your heart. Yeah, there may be people who looked at my resume and said, why does she have camp counselor on there? That's so irrelevant. Fine, they're not my people.
No.
But in this case, that woman, Sarah, I remember exactly who it was. I don't even know if we ever met in person, but Sarah Kirschbaum-Levy was her name. She worked at Nickelodeon and she was a camp counselor.
That's awesome. It's the tie that binds.
Absolutely.
It's really wonderful. Well, let's take a break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about getting the shit kicked out of you by life and what the fuck you do afterwards.
Think?
Just a little bit.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No. All right. So we'll be right back. We're back, and let's talk about how you got the cool pink boob cancer. Wasn't that fantastic? The wonderful that gets all the PR and the press and makes every other cancer feel shamed.
Did you see my Cosmo piece, though?
I read your Cosmo piece, yeah. And what was the title?
Why does breast cancer get such good PR? Which is why I, as soon as you were talking.
Have you met boobs?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was never a health hypochondriac and really never like expected, like most people don't expect a cancer diagnosis. But in my case, I barely ever saw a doctor for anything. I barely took Tylenol for anything. But I think if there was one thing I thought might be in my future, it was breast cancer, because my mom had it when I was 14. She was 46. I knock a lot of wood.
Yeah.
She's like 81 now and doing great. But I began getting screened at 32. Because the general rule of thumb...
How did you get coverage for that?
Well, there's a couple of things. The general rule of thumb is if you, and I shouldn't say this with certainty because so much has changed.
Oh, like family history asterisk?
Right.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah, but God knows what is going on now, because all the recommendations on age for breast cancer, like, you know, they went from 40 to 50, back to 40 to 45. Yeah. It's all over the place, and it drives me so wild, because I know so many women diagnosed so young that those guidelines they're broken. But going back to my story, I started getting screened at 32. My mom had me initially going to her radiologist. So I think it was a combination of things. I'm sure I got a prescription, but even if I hadn't, I had people behind the scenes who probably were helping me to navigate it. Like my mom for sure, but also her doctor. So that became really relevant because I had really dense breast tissue, which many women have.
Well, that's very typical in younger women.
Correct. And so I was from the outset getting mammograms and sonograms. Now that is not standard, because standard of care is a mammogram. And it wasn't until very recently, like last September, that legislation passed that required doctors to even tell women if they had dense breast tissue. And there's still no requirement that insurance cover what's deemed supplemental screening. Right. But it's not supplemental if your mammogram doesn't tell you anything.
I've heard it referred to as vanity screening.
Yeah, I think what's so crazy about that, confusing, is, you know, I think insurance companies are like, well, if we covered this, people would just go get screened so many times.
Yeah.
Like, no, they wouldn't. No one wants to go in for those scans.
There's no demand for it.
There's no demand. No one wants to go multiple times if they don't have to. There's so much anxiety. So I was 32, began getting screened. Everything was fine, as is so often the case, until it isn't.
Yeah.
Right? And when I was 40, I had a palpable lump. I had things in the past that were cysts, and I think I knew this.
Did you find it yourself?
I felt it. I was also due for my annual. I felt it, actually. We were talking before we were recording about the Mets, and you know, they've had a rough run, but so it was right when they were in the World Series.
Let's go Mets.
So the World Series didn't work out, and my cancer biopsies also didn't work out. But so I felt it. I then had my mammogram and sonogram. Mammogram was clean. Sonogram showed one tumor that ultimately was, I mean, the radiologists in these kind of cases, you can read their energy.
Yeah.
So radiologists, you know, oh, you have to come for a biopsy. But like, I was 99.9% sure what that biopsy was going to tell me based on his energy.
Yeah.
So had to wait 9 or 10 days. It was December 1st was that first imaging. December 10th was the biopsy. And then it wasn't until December 17th that I got the results. So you're talking a 2.5 week window of suspicious. And I got that diagnosis, and it was just like my mom's. Like, it was a hormone positive breast cancer, which is the most common type. I felt very, very fortunate to have a mom who had been through this, and also just being well connected. And so I ended up at MSK like December 29th. I ultimately had a double mastectomy at Mount Sinai. And then I had ACT chemo, which is about as cookie cutter as you can get. So much so that it's the same chemo my mom had in 1990. And then I was, quote unquote, cured.
Yeah.
And on hormone therapy. And a few months later.
Was that like good old tamoxifen?
Exactly. Which I actually initially had almost no side effects from. I felt incredibly fortunate. They don't tell you, I know you know this, but no one warns you about, oh, you finished treatment. Like, you're now going to maybe crash.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
just get on with your life. You're fine now.
Right. And
Yeah.
so all of a sudden that's because everyone was like, you're so inspiring. You're so strong. I never missed a dance class during cancer, like all of it.
Yeah, we didn't get to your dancer background too, but that's for later.
I thought when you said you had a question for me that no one would have ever asked me, it was going to be about dance, actually.
Okay. That was the second question.
Like, how did you strip your way onto Netflix? But
Yeah.
we'll get to that. That's a little teaser. Stay tuned.
But you're bringing up a very, very poignant point. It's like, when it ends, it doesn't end, and they don't really help you figure that out.
And in some ways, when it ends, it starts.
Yes.
Because the reality is when you and my boss, when I was diagnosed, I mean, everyone should be so lucky to have a boss like Lisa. And the very first thing she said to me was, this is where all your executive skills are going to come in handy. And you are like more than capable. We're going to get through this, but also like you have all these skills, these project skills. And that's how I treated cancer. I might have had a few spreadsheets, like all the things. And so when you're in it and you just know your next step, right? Like whether that next step is I need to get that second consult and now I have to get that tissue specimen from this hospital to that hospital, none of which is automated, as you know. I was like human courier running these things around New York City.
Rotary dialing and everything. Yeah.
I mean, like bonkers.
Yes.
And then I would pause and take a breath because there was nothing else to do. But like while you're in it, you're in it. And so that was like, those were moments where I didn't have the headspace to be worried about the future in the real way, because I was just like, I got to get through. My cell counts need to stay high so I can get through the next chemo. I can't get sick. I don't want to miss this dance class, whatever it was. And then you're done. And it's like, okay, go back in the world. And that's when I started to like really struggle initially. And I don't know, it's all relative, but I felt lower than I had. And I remember going back in and talking to a nurse and saying, like, is this normal? And her name was Jenna. And she said, well, yeah, like 80% of people, this is when they start to really emotionally process. And this is where it feels really hard.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, don't you think you should tell people?
Yeah, right.
Like, don't you think 80% is substantial enough to give a little heads up?
This would have been nice to know yesterday.
Because each of us who comprise that 80% is sitting alone on our couch wondering what's wrong with us.
Yeah.
Like, I've just been told, okay, you're good. You're done. Go live your life. And instead, those are the moments where it starts to feel hard in a different way. And you're not seeing your doctor as much, and you're not getting poison/medicine put in your veins, and the hair is starting to grow back. And all of that combined for one of the moments that felt low. But then I was on tamoxifen and kind of moving forward, and I felt a very subtle hip pain. And it was so low level, like a 0.5 on a scale of 1 to 10, but I'm very in tune with my body from dance. And I also had just survived cancer. So I was a very vigilant patient. And I told my oncologist, I feel this. And I don't recall having an injury.
What year was this around?
I could tell you it was November 2016.
Okay.
So it was only a few months after I finished chemo. And the thing is you can't go scan, and I don't fault the doctors for this. Every single time a cancer survivor has a pain, they're not going to go rush you to scan.
No.
Right? That would not be, it's just not feasible, and it's not even logical. So we agreed that I would monitor it and just see what happened, right? Because I was so active. Like, it could have just been an injury that I didn't remember having. But a few months later, it had not cleared up, meaning the pain. And that's when I started getting really scared. So my oncologist agreed to scan it. And here's the thing. She was so convinced it wasn't cancer, she sent me for an MRI, because she actually thought, well, I'd love to not only rule out cancer, but also help figure out whatever is going on in your hip. So got the MRI. Cy and I read it as suspicious for likely metastatic disease. But we then did a PET scan, a bone scan, a blood test for tumor markers, and all of those checked out as normal. And I was getting two opinions, Cy and I and MSK. And both oncologists kind of thought, you know what? Let's just scan. Let's do a repeat MRI in a few months. Let's see what happens, right? And a few months later, the pain had gone away. The MRI, so the best possible case would have been what they saw disappeared.
Right.
That didn't happen. but it also didn't grow. It was static. Cancer tends to grow.
Right.
So they were like, well, you're not in pain anymore. Maybe this is just your body, right? That's why we don't scan everyone in the world.
Right.
Because everyone has funky things. So we agreed. So this had taken us from March to July.
Did you name it?
I did not name it. Why? Should I have? Is that a thing?
Yeah, because, Tommy doesn't hurt today.
I didn't do that.
Okay.
Maybe. Well, I was about to say maybe next time, but we're hoping for no more next times.
No more next times.
So anyway, so that had taken us from March to July. And then we agreed we would do one more MRI in December. And we did. And again, same exact image. So by then, everyone just agreed, you're good. Like I was given the all clear. Like
Right.
You are good. And that felt like a relief. P.S. 2 months later, my oncologist felt another lump beside my implant. I didn't even know that was possible.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So
There's nothing left to get cancer.
oh, but
Famous
you'd be
last words,
surprised, right? So we hoped it was scar tissue. I loved my plastic surgeon. So I was like, great, any excuse to go visit him.
Yeah.
So I went there. He didn't think it was scar tissue, unfortunately. So he sent me to my breast surgeon and she immediately sent me for a biopsy.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple days later, that came back positive for cancer. And once the cancer was back here, they sent me for a full body PET scan.
Were you working this whole time?
In that moment, I had been trying to start sort of like my first foray into entrepreneurship. So I was trying, I should say, to create something akin to a WeWork for mind, body, spirit professionals. So I was trying, at the time that this was going on, I was trying to raise $3 million to create a space that I ultimately never built. And I, P.S. got very lucky because with the pandemic.
There's your Stanford MBA coming in handy.
Right. With the pandemic, 10,000 square feet would have not been ideal. No. But at any rate, so Monday I was re-diagnosed in my breast. Wednesday had a PET scan. It lit up ever so slightly more in my hip than it had in a year earlier. Here's the crazy thing. One oncologist, one hospital said, we still don't think it's cancer. Don't worry about it. The other said, we also don't think it's cancer. We think we can get to the spot, because it was a tiny little spot on my bone. We think we could get to that spot with a machine-guided biopsy. Let's do it, and let's finally put your concern to rest. Mm-hmm. By the way, it wasn't hurting, right? If we hadn't had a PET scan. So I'm sure you know where the story is going, right? You've seen my story. So that biopsy ultimately came back positive for cancer. And that's when the vocabulary for a breast cancer patient changes, because it can come back countless times, including for me when it did beside my implant. But when it comes back in the breast, 2, 3, 4 recurrences, that's all considered fully curable.
Right.
It's local. But when it goes anywhere else, which in my case was my hip
stage
bone,
4.
That is right. Stage 4, metastatic, incurable. They're all synonymous with each other. And for me, that was the moment that I dreaded most, right? Because you are led to believe, at least with breast cancer, I know every cancer is different, but like you are led to believe you either need to be cured or you're going to end up dead, right? Right? Those are the two lanes that for so long I was led to believe existed.
But this was 7 years ago.
It was.
And as far as I'm concerned, you're still alive.
Well, so that's the point that I like to make when I'm speaking to people, right? I am not cured, technically. I'm also clearly not dead.
Yes.
Right? So we agree on that.
Yes.
So
you look great for being alive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so here's the thing. We are living, many of us, and not everyone, and I am the first to acknowledge, like the same medicine that I have been a super responder on, because I'm on my first line of defense. I have been incredibly fortunate. I started in 2018. I am still on it. My scans have been NED. I know you told me not to knock anything, but I am going to knock wood for that.
Yeah, we'll knock wood together. Ready?
Okay, great.
Okay.
So my most recent scan was in January of this year. No evidence of disease.
This speaks to something that I don't think makes people uncomfortable anymore. But having been diagnosed 30 years ago when everyone just kind of died 100% of the time, or so it felt, to show that a percentage of people are just living with it, that's progress. Is everyone going to make it? No. And that's terrible. But just the idea that we could say, 20 years ago, oh, you'll be living with breast cancer and you'll be all right, is a weird thing to put through your head.
Correct. And actually, there was a study done a long time ago. I remember one of my college roommates' husbands does research in this area. And there was a study done on bodies of people who died through things like car accidents and like unrelated to cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And a substantial number of the women's bodies had some minimal amount of breast cancer in them, similar for men with prostate cancer. I can't name the study, but I remember sort of like learning it kind of like similar to my hip. Like there are people who have these cancers in their bodies and they're not disrupting their lives. I do think it's progress for, of course, like right, for however many people are living with cancer. I also think that in the case of breast cancer, that there are still so many people dying, and yet there is an ignorance to that.
Yep.
Because of, going back to that Cosmo article, because of how it is positioned in the media so often. And in fact, in part because of how many people do survive breast cancer, the optics on it are that it is, I mean, people have said this to me, like, oh, it's a good cancer. Like, if you had to get a cancer, it's a good one. Not really.
No good cancers.
And right. And it's a wild card. And the part that the stat that most people don't know that is scary, and so they don't know it for a reason, is that 30% of people who have had early stage breast cancer, meaning fully curable breast cancer, end up metastatic. Like, It's not a rounding error. It's not some small number.
No.
And so when you think about the fact that I had the same chemo that my mom had, right? Like, that's sort of crazy.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of innovative treatments, and that's awesome. There are vaccine trials that I wish were getting more funding. I don't know what's going to happen over the next 4 years, right? That is
what's going on? I'm totally getting.
Right? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that, first of all, I'm perpetually immunocompromised and now I have to worry about maybe getting the measles somewhere is bonkers.
Well, this is going to air in like late spring, so we'll see.
We'll see what happens. But, right, we'll see if we're still here. But like, I always say that I only need science to stay one step ahead of my body.
That's a good way to put it.
Right? Well, but we need science.
Yes.
And I say I'm going to live to be 88 because it's double infinity if you take the 8 and
it's also Back to the Future, so you're going to win that one anyway.
I did. My childhood crush was Michael J. Fox.
Okay. Mine too, although it was Leah Thompson. So same movie.
Same movie.
Yeah.
But the other thing I want to say is that with so many of us living longer, I do believe more attention has to be given to not only keeping us alive, but also keeping us alive in bodies that are healthy, not only from a cancer perspective, but like in my case, like bodies where you're not breaking in two. I have a titanium rod in my femur right now, not because I broke my femur, but because one of my bone strengthening medicines was dosed at such a high level for cancer patients relative to when it's used for osteoporosis patients and I was on it for 5 years because I've been thriving from a cancer perspective. But basically I was given too much medicine and it left my femur super vulnerable to a break.
You must be fun at TSA at the airports.
You know what's it's such a bummer? It doesn't go off.
Oh.
Same with when I had...
But you want one of those cards that lets you get out of jail free at the airport.
I had, when I had my tissue expanders, when I flew, I was so excited. I got a note from my plastic surgeon. He's like, it's not going to go off. I'm like, no, I want the note just in case.
Yes.
It was like a badge of honor. Those didn't make it go off. The titanium rod doesn't make it go off. But like the fact that I had to have...
We're going to have to inject it with lead.
Right? The fact that I had to have a titanium rod put into my body and then recover from that surgery because of cancer is crazy. I have implants in my body that were recalled by the FDA because they are linked to a secondary cancer, a lymphoma.
That's fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
So all of this, like, but you just start to like layer these things on. The longer one gets to survive, that's amazing. I am so grateful. Well, and also... it needs to stay intact.
Well, I would agree you're intact, alive and intact. Let's take one more break and come back with a lightning round.
Okay.
So before I get to the lightning round, you wrote an article that really hit me hard, and which is the redefining why me. And I bring it up because I never asked why me. It didn't occur to me to say why me, because I never felt it mattered. Because that just means like the future is determined, right? And I don't like that idea. And why me meant I was chosen to go through shit for some reason. And one might argue spirit and karma, that's the thing. But you wrote redefining why me. What is your redefinition of why me?
I think that the way that people look at that why me question, or the way that it's often asked, is in a moment of a really big challenge, right? We rarely question why me when something amazing happens in our lives.
Yes.
Right? Like I didn't say, why was I so lucky to be born into the family that I'm in? Or why am I so lucky to get to be an auntie to these three, right? Or why did I live these charmed 40 years when I was so healthy and life was relatively easy, right? So I think that if we don't ask why me in those moments, that, you know, it didn't make sense. First of all, what was happening. So it just was. But also I didn't dwell on the why me because it was more of a, like, why not me? And what is, where am I in my life? What opportunities might exist for me alongside this obstacle? So if anything, to ask why me in the way of what can I bring forth into the world? And that doesn't mean I had to go like start a company or do something huge, but even in the small moments. And I see that all the time. I mean, my doctors have told me I'm the kind of patient who teaches them. I connect dots for them. If I see something wrong at the hospital, I speak up. Or if there's some insurance hiccup, which, as you know, happen all the time, I then will say, okay, that's great that we fixed this for me, but how do we avoid this happening for someone else?
I like the answer. So lightning round is, I asked AI of all my guests, if Sally's life were a Netflix series, what 3 cultural celebrity icons or influencers from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or the American media zeitgeist would be playing you?
I hope they picked the right one.
I was impressed it chose these 3 people. And again, it's all very intentionally gender roulette. I'll put it that way.
I'm so curious who came up.
You are Carrie Bradshaw. And I would argue the good parts of Carrie Bradshaw, because she's a terrible fucking human being.
It's so funny. I might be the only person who didn't really regularly watch.
Okay, I'm guilty as charged.
But I mean, I've seen enough to know. Okay,
but it says because you write with honesty, you live your life on your own terms, and you're not afraid to redefine what thriving looks like. It said you are RuPaul because you turn adversity into power, celebrate self-expression, and know how to own the stage of your life that you're in.
That's amazing.
And my favorite, you're Mr. Rogers.
You just made me so happy. I love Mr. Rogers.
Because you're all about authenticity, kindness, and helping people discover their best selves.
I used to have a lot of cardigans too.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
I do take my shoes off at home.
Well done.
I have a friend who's going to be especially happy. We quote Mr. Rogers to each other.
Well, Sally Wolf.
I can't believe. Okay. I thought you were going to tell me who was going to play me.
Yeah. It's the 3 of them. Blend them all together.
Oh, they are playing me.
It's just like combine the 3 of them and that's who's playing you in the Netflix series.
Interesting.
And I approve.
Interesting. I can't wait to see this series.
Let's get on that.
I am on Netflix in a pole dancing documentary, so they could just have the Sally Wolf.
All right. Well, now you just dropped that. We're going to tease that in the episode notes because we can't not have the listeners find that.
Okay, fair enough. Right. So I've already been on Netflix, but I look forward to Mr. Rogers too.
A pleasure to have you on the show. Again, we'll put your LinkedIn, we'll put your company, everything will be in the notes so they can discover how awesome you are and how alive you are.
Thank you. Definitely alive.
Yes.
Knock wood.
Okay. See you, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a production of Matthew Zachary Worldwide. The executive producer is Matthew Zachary. It is mixed and edited by Kyle Moore. If you like the show, ratings and reviews are always welcome wherever you get your podcasts. If you have guest suggestions or would like to learn more about sponsorship opportunities, email podcast@matthewzachary.com. For more information about Matthew Zachary and Matthew Zachary Worldwide, visit matthewzachary.com.
Are you looking for a new job or want a career change? Look no further than Monster.com. Need a little help standing out? Our expert resume writing services will make sure you shine. Want to brush up on your interview skills? Engage with our AI interview prep tool. Want some advice on negotiating your new salary? Visit our salary tools and extensive library of career advice articles, and you'll have all the tips and tricks you'll need to succeed. Visit Monster.com today and take the first step towards your career. Monster.com. Find your right job fit.